Insights space. YouTube, HTTPS, Facebook, HT. Indian economy and issues relating to planning, mobilization of resources. Indian economy and issues relating to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development and employment. Growth, development and employment. Critically analyze Reserve Bank of India's RBI inflation targeting of the Indian economy since 2016, 250 words. Difficulty level, tough. Preference, Indian, wide. Secure synopsis. Inflation targeting is one of the Introduction. Inflation targeting, it is a central banking policy that revolves around adjusting monetary policy to achieve a specified annual rate of inflation. The principle of inflation targeting is based on the belief that long-term economic growth is best achieved by maintaining price stability, and price stability is achieved by controlling inflation. It is in line with Urjit Patel Committee recommendations. An amendment to RBI Act by the Finance Bill, 2016, has made IT as the primary objective of RBI and it is also accountable in case of failure. Body. The Centre has decided to retain the inflation target of 4%, with a tolerance band of plus or minus 2 percentage points for the Monetary Policy Committee of the RBI for the coming 5 years from the 1st of April 2021. The Reserve Bank of India, recently in the report on currency and finance for FY21, has said the current inflation target of 4% with a plus or minus 2% tolerance band is appropriate for the next 5 years. Important observations made. Trend inflation had fallen from above 9% before flexible inflation targeting FIT to a range of 3.8 minus 4.3% during FIT, indicating that 4% is the appropriate level of the inflation target. An inflation rate of 6% is the appropriate upper tolerance limit for the target. A lower bound above 2% can lead to actual inflation frequently dipping below the tolerance band, while a lower bound below 2% will hamper growth, indicating that an inflation rate of 2% is the appropriate lower tolerance bound. Inflation targeting by RBI since 2016. Critical analysis. Inflation targeting has been successful on the grounds that the inflation rate has remained within the band agreed to between the government and the RBI, and whether it has been achieved by anchoring inflation expectations. However, inflation in India entered the prescribed band of 2% to 6% 2 years before inflation targeting was adopted in 2016-17. In fact, inflation had fallen steadily since 2011-12, halving by 2015-16. This by itself suggests that there is a mechanism driving inflation other than what is imagined in inflation targeting. Secure, Telegram, YouTube, Facebook. The view is further strengthened by the finding that the decline in inflation over the 5 years concerned was led by the relative price of food. While falling food price inflation per se does not rule out the possibility that expectations of inflation may have fallen in this period. But it would be difficult to explain why expectations would have fallen so sharply even in the absence of inflation targeting, considered essential for anchoring expectations. Finally, it is the flaring up of both inflation and inflation expectations after March 2020, when the COVID-19 lockdown was announced, that makes it difficult to believe the thesis of an overheating economy. On the other hand, we can explain the flaring up of inflation in terms of food prices, as supply chains were disrupted due to the lockdown. Concerns with inflation targeting. Conflicting patterns shown. Over the past 5 years, inflation in India has been controlled via inflation targeting, and its benefits will be analyzed through 5 variables, namely growth, private investment, exports, non-performing assets, NPAs of commercial banks, and employment. Growth. The economy's trend rate of growth actually began to decline after 2010-11. So, inflation targeting could not have caused it, but it is of interest that sharply falling inflation could do nothing to revive growth, belying the proposition that low inflation is conducive to growth. Investment. For investment, there is reason to believe that higher interest rates, the toolkit for inflation targeting, may have been harmful. The swing in the real interest rate of over 5 percentage points in 2013-14 was powered further in 2016, when inflation targeting was adopted, and could have contributed to a declining private investment rate. It is interesting that policy entrepreneurs assert that the benefits of low inflation may be considerable for private investment. Export and employment. Exports and employment performed fairly poor since inflation targeting became official. NPAs, non-performing assets. It has long been recognized that a central bank focusing on inflation may lose control of financial stability. NPAs have grown since 2016, and the cases of IL&FS, PMC Bank, PNB and Yes Bank suggest that poor management and malfeasance in the financial sector could escape scrutiny when the central bank hunkers down to inflation targeting. Conclusion. In the conduct of monetary policy in an open economy setting, foreign exchange reserves and associated liquidity management are key. There is a need to enhance the RBI sterilization capacity. Secure, Telegram, YouTube, HTTP, Facebook, The primary focus of FIT on price stability augurs well for further liberalization of the capital account and eventual internationalization of the Indian rupees. Value addition. Pros of inflation targeting. It will lead to increased transparency and accountability. Policy will be linked to medium, long-term goals, but with some short-term flexibility. With inflation targeting in place, people will tend to have low inflation expectations. If there was no inflation target, people could have high inflation expectations, encouraging workers to demand higher wages and firms to put up prices. It also helps in avoiding boom and bust cycles. If inflation creeps up, then it can cause various economic costs such as uncertainty leading to lower investment, loss of international competitiveness and reduced value of savings. This can also be avoided with targeting. Inflation targets can have various benefits, especially during normal economic circumstances. However, the prolonged recession since the credit crunch of 2008 has severely tested the usefulness of inflation targets. Cons. It puts too much weight on inflation relative to other goals. Central banks start to ignore more pressing problems like unemployment. Inflation target reduces flexibility. It has the potential to constrain policy in some circumstances in which it would not be desirable to do so. Cost push inflation may cause a temporary blip in inflation. It cannot help remove supply bottlenecks and shortages. It cannot help external shocks. Exchange rate might suffer in the short run. Growth in employment might take hit.